Amazingly, God's principles of creation have been utilized, of course, in creating infinitely complex but yet beautiful aspects of his creative handiwork. But as I have gotten involved in the mental health arena, I realize that these same principles are very important in being able to God's original plan for us was to have a brain that was just absolutely amazing. Let us create man in our image, a willpower with a balanced brain where we can continue to make wise decisions that help us in the long term and not just think about short-term feelings. And many times in the depression and anxiety, those individuals that have world, those aspects that does to the brain actually of doing short-term things to alter the way we feel, which can actually produce some very negative long-term consequences. So in going forward with our slides today, and I don't know if you are actually able to see me at the time that this is happening. I'm going to see if I can move forward. Okay, I think that worked. Our brain is really who we are. When someone asks, "Who are you?" they're not really talking about your nose or your eyes or your feet. They're not talking about even what we're talking about, because our world is actually our appearance. But there are people that have been married and intimate for years, and one of the intimate partners will ask the other one, "Who are you?" In other words, I thought I knew you, but I realize now I don't know you. And there are aspects of you that I just, I'm just shocked because you are not who I thought they're talking about. When they say things like that, they're actually talking about your brain, which is where your character is at. That's who you are, and who you are has so much to do with your brain. And this is why we need to be very careful in regards to the treatment of our brain. And we also should not ever voluntarily do anything that makes our brain less effective. And the wonderful aspect of the human brain is that it can change. This is why one of the most common comments or questions that we get when individuals come to our program is, "Do you think I can actually get better?" They feel so overwhelmed and helpless. They've tried so many other things that have failed in regards to their treatments that they think their case is helpless, in other words, and hopeless. They think that they're actually, their brain cannot change, and it's in a bad condition and it won't be able to change. But the good news is that if we still have frontal lobe circulation and activity possible, our brain can very positively change for the better. And this is called neuroplasticity. And it's the ability for the brain to reorganize itself. We see this even when portions of the brain have died through stroke. As long as we have some frontal lobe left, we're going to be able to actually have other portions of the brain take over that portion, but it's going to be a process. And it can be amazing in regards to what the human brain is actually capable of changing into. And of course, it can also change for the worse. And if we don't understand the principles of positive neuroplasticity, and we are just going by our feelings and our negative automatic thoughts, it can continue to change for the worse. And this is what produces the downward spiral that often help. People are actually searching for help. They will often eventually find us and come to a program where they don't realize when they're coming here, but we are going to be utilizing God's principles and what he did to create this world to actually help to recreate their brain. And of course, it's God's principles of neuroplasticity that are in the front and center of this because of the amazing ways he made the brain in its ability to adapt. So I just wanted to understand, or have you understand, the importance of taking care of our brain, because that's really who we are, and that's the ultimate priority. And it's why Solomon said, wisdom is above rubies. And he also said, anything in the world that you desire is not to be compared to it. So if you have a strong desire on your heart that is not intimately connected with wisdom, you are majoring in minors and minoring in majors, because the major is really where the wisdom is at, and that wisdom has to do with changing our brain so that it can be indeed as wise as God intended it to be when he originally created us. And by the way, I'll just mention there's two parts to this series, today and tomorrow. And I know we only had about 40 participants when we joined, and we joined late. I'm sure we lost a lot that were not so patient. But for those that are taking notes and paying attention, we are going to have a little quiz at the end of the section tomorrow. There'll also be a question and answer session and a little quiz. And the winner of that quiz will be able to see in live time how everyone is doing, or at least who the leaders are. We won't see everyone because we don't want to see the ones that aren't doing so well. But we'll be able to see who the top leaders in the quiz are. And the very top leader will actually receive a nice award that actually has to do with positive mental health aspects of things. And we'll explain that more tomorrow. But just some motivation to pay attention and to take notes. As many of you know, I'm also a professor at a college, and I teach college classes. And so I'm used to the quiz and test format, and I've noticed it helps motivate my students to learn their material well, and I hope it's motivating for you as well. So I can't believe what has happened to you. This is often what happens at the end of our program. As they come home to their families, the most amazing thing is when they see them in action that first day after they're home. You are so different, and it's different in every way that's positive. Even their appearance improves in 10 days when their mental health gets better. And to see the before and after difference of just the beginnings of neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity doesn't take hold until about 20 weeks of working on this, where the brain can actually undergo some very positive, permanent changes, as long as we work on the maintenance aspect of things. But even though we have only done 6% of that 20 weeks, with all of the comprehensive aspects of the creative power that God has, and the recreative power that God has put into the brain can dramatically change in as little as 10 days. And this is something that the scientific world still does not understand very well. They think neuroplasticity sometimes is going to take years, and it's a very patient process. And I didn't understand that either when we first started dealing with mental health. In fact, our first programs that we put on back in 2001, 2002, these were residential programs. I was telling everybody, in fact, all of the screeners had to tell them, Dr. Nedley says you're not going to be any better in 19 days. It's going to take time for this all to work. And of course, even medications take a lot of time before they start working if they're going to work positively in regards to depression. And so I wanted them all to know when they were paying their money that they weren't going to be any better in 19 days. One of the reasons why I believe that is because I was working in an outpatient setting, and we can't change everything about an individual in one session. It would be overwhelming for them. And so we work on just certain aspects of the brain in our community program. And by the time 8 weeks comes about, then we can see very statistically,
Excuse me to interrupt. This is highly normal, but there is absolutely no sound anymore. So I guess there must be somehow a problem in connection. We can see you speaking, but there is no sound. I think it might be easier to stop sharing the screen. And maybe we just can try, I don't know whether it will really help, but that you leave this meeting room and get back into the meeting room. That might eventually help.
Hello?
Yes, perfect. Now we can hear you again. I think we lost like the last 2 minutes of your presentation.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can go back and share the screen. To summarize what I might have said in the last 2 minutes, I was talking about the time element in neuroplasticity. And we used to think that in order for the brain to change positively, it took weeks, months, and even years. And it is true, the brain can continue to improve over the course of years. But in dealing with depression and anxiety, our first residential programs, I would tell them, and we were doing 19-day programs then, not 10-day, but I would tell them all that they weren't going to get better by the end of 19 days. It would take at least 8 weeks of continuation of this. And of course, I was used to working in an outpatient setting where we couldn't change everything together. We had to just work on one item at a time. And over the course of 8 weeks, we would see significant changes. And I thought the same thing would happen when we use all these changes up front. But how wrong I was. The vast majority were improving before the 10-day point. And although not everyone improved in 10 days, everyone did improve by day 18. And they were all leaving with such a dramatic change. And that was only 6% of the time element that we used to think that would take to very dramatically change the brain. Now, as they would continue on these principles at home, they would be able to produce even more dramatic results, far more dramatic results. And so the most common statement that their relatives make after they see them in action and pick them up in the airport and see them the next couple of days is, I just can't believe what happened to you in 10 days, how different your brain is. And really it's because we're utilizing the principles of creation that God used to create us in helping to recreate that brain into a wonderful new creation. And as the Bible says, we can actually be a new creation. That's part of neuroplasticity. So part of healing the brain is healing our biochemistry. And the world itself understands this. In fact, the most commonly sold drugs throughout the world now are actually mind-altering drugs. And these are prescription drugs that are supposed to help with depression, one of the most common single mental illness, and then also anxiety. If we put all the anxiety disorders, they're even more common than depression. And so many of these drugs are actually working in the synapse to be able to help the activity in the brain. And if I were to, you can see a synaptic cleft here being demonstrated in the diagram. But I would just like to mention, this is the most common anti-anxiety and antidepressant that's used to affect this synaptic area. But as you notice at the top of the screen, you see an amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan is needed to make serotonin. And it's a process. If we get tryptophan into our gut, it doesn't mean it's going into our brain. It's actually a carbohydrate mediated mechanism that gets it into the brain, and it has to be a carrier because tryptophan is too large a neutral amino acid to cross the blood-brain barrier. It can get into your muscles pretty easily because there's no blood-brain barrier there. But the blood-brain barrier are almost like steel pipes, and it's there to protect the brain. The brain is the most important organ in the body, and the brain is very vulnerable. It's just a little bit higher consistency than cottage cheese, and it is very vulnerable to large molecules producing neurotoxicity, and that toxicity can actually damage the brain incredibly. And so the Lord created the arteries to be far different when they get into the brain to protect our brain from the toxins that we might come across. And as a result, we don't get anything but the smallest molecules through to the brain unless they have specific carriers. And you can see once tryptophan gets into the brain, then it has to get into the neuron, and then it goes into 5-hydroxytryptophan, and then finally serotonin. And if there is a shortage of serotonin in these vesicles, when there's an electrical transmission, we will not get as much serotonin going into that synaptic area. You can see a couple of those vesicles. They're emptying out pretty well. So there's quite a few serotonin molecules there in that synapse. And when the serotonin molecule, I think you can see my arrow, when the serotonin molecule actually binds on to one of these receptors, that's when communication occurs and the next neuron then fires. And so this is how things occur normally. Now, once that synaptic activity occurs, the serotonin receptor releases that serotonin molecule, and that serotonin molecule, as well as the extra that were in the clefts to make sure that there was going to be a neurotransmission, those get vacuumed back up into what we call the serotonin reuptake transporter. And this serotonin reuptake is very important because it helps to preserve serotonin. It's quite an ordeal to make serotonin. It requires quite a lot of energy, requires carriers in the blood-brain barrier. And so our body and brain is very efficient. It was designed to be very efficient. And so instead of wasting all of this serotonin that was dumped here, the idea is to have it vacuum back up so it can be used again. And that way we don't have to continue to try to go through serotonin production at high levels. And so when the serotonin is down, what happens in regards to these drugs that are most commonly used? These drugs actually don't help us make more serotonin. They actually don't help us to build up more receptors here. Those are things that would require nutrition and lifestyle factors, and the factors that we're going to talk about in regards to creation, the 7 days of creation. And so how does the drug manufacturers try to get more synaptic activity? They actually produce a substance that can actually go into the brain and block this reuptake. They're actually vacuum cleaner blockers. And as you wonder, well, how does that work? Well, if there's a shortage of serotonin and there's not much there, if we block the reuptake, it's going to be around longer because it's not going back up. And so it can diffuse and go into the receptor, and you can get a delayed neurotransmission, but at least you'll get a delayed synaptic activity from that. And so, and this is one of the reasons why it takes some time for these drugs to work as well. And so at 1 week, you start noticing a difference as a result of these vacuum cleaners being plugged. But unfortunately, when the vacuum cleaners are plugged, we're actually going to have less serotonin coming back up. And so that means we're going to need to start producing even more serotonin. And so these drugs, and Temple University showed this very clearly, whenever antidepressant drugs are introduced in a community, it takes about a year, but at the year point, the incidence of depression goes up. The incidence of anxiety goes up. So these drugs were not really designed to treat the individual long term. They were designed to treat it over the course of maybe months while we fix the underlying defect that's causing the issue of not being able to produce enough serotonin, for instance. And we'll get into these molecules and what they actually do for us as well. And so this is why it's imperative that we not treat this disease just with pharmaceuticals. In addition to plugging those vacuum cleaners, there's some problems that occur when those vacuum cleaners are plugged. Impulsivity goes up. Our affect becomes more flat. Now, a lot of people with depression like that, or anxiety like it, because they feel like they're feeling too much. They cry at just the littlest things, or they get anxious over things that really shouldn't cause anxiety. So when these drugs cause a more flat affect, they actually feel better as far as the not going to the worst side of their feelings, but they don't have the ability to feel elated. They don't have the ability to actually feel great and actually have the rewards of living the joyful lifestyle in the Lord. At thy right hand, there are pleasures forevermore. And so they're not really able to feel those pleasures. And of course, the increase in impulsivity makes their decision-making go down. And of course, this is why suicide rates actually go up at first when we're utilizing these drugs. We're utilizing from the depression, but suicide rates go up because impulsivity actually worsens before the depression actually gets better. And so this underscores why we need additional measures and why medications are so limited. The best we're able to get in regards to the antidepressant drugs is 1 in 8. It's called a number needed to treat. It's a new way of looking at statistics. And the number needed to treat in regards to antidepressant drugs, the best we can do is 1 out of 8. So in other words, if we treat 8 patients, only 1 of them will actually benefit from this. And again, the benefit is going to be more short-term, and it is not going to last a long time unless we change some of the other things in the neuron to help with the improved biochemistry. So I hope that's clear. And so let's go ahead to the next slide and actually get in to the creative power of the Lord and what he did to create this world and how these principles are utilized to help recreate the brain that is having trouble. The first day of creation, what did God say? Let there be light. And this is a principle that is extremely important in regards to improving mental health. Without light, it's very clear in regards to creation, nothing else could have happened. And so this is the first substrate that was necessary for the creation. And it actually is, we could say it's the first substrate as well for helping to recreate the brain. When people come to us, we are exposing them to light first thing in the morning. And it's a simple therapy, but it's very important. If they come here in the wintertime where it doesn't get light until 7:30, we're actually giving them a light box that simulates the blue sky that actually helps to set the body clock, helps you to have more energy in the daytime, more sleep at night. And it's actually helping us to produce more serotonin from the tryptophan we have. Light is one of those things that's very necessary for us to make serotonin in adequate amounts. I was actually given the privilege of, this is the first time, according to Heart Research, that publishes Nathan Green's paintings that are soon going to be available in his creation series. He created, actually drew 7 amazing paintings regarding creation. And this is day 1 of creation that's being demonstrated there. And of course, there's a lot of equations there that have to do with light. We're still studying light. Light actually travels. And it travels, 186,000 miles per second. And light has so much to do with also energy. And of course, you can see energy equations. It's God's energy actually coming in to helping to produce that light. And interestingly, even in Bible times, when servants of the Lord started to have severe depression, like Elijah. Elijah was a faithful a servant of the Lord. It tells us that depression and anxiety is not always from us departing from the will of the Lord necessarily, because Elijah was intent on doing the will of the Lord, although it actually wasn't his will to run away from Jezebel at the time. He just thought he needed to do that hurriedly and didn't pray over that matter so much. One of the reasons why he found himself severely depressed thereafter. But he wanted to isolate. He wanted to be in a cave. He was hiding. He was fearful. And he also wanted to die. And the Lord had to do things to get him out into the light. He knew he wasn't going to get better unless he got into the lights, out into the light. So he had to produce winds to get him out of the cave, and earthquakes, and and Elijah get out of that cave. You need light in order to get better. And now we have the scientific data that shows light is actually superior to medications in treating depression and anxiety if we're going to use either one or the other. We actually get better quicker with light than we do with antidepressants, and we also get better more effectively, and it lasts a longer period of time as long as we keep up with the maintenance in light therapy. So as mentioned, the pineal gland, which is I didn't mention the pineal gland, but this is a gland in the brain that is just the size of a kernel of corn. And it draws an amino acid, tryptophan, from the blood, and it gets concentrated in the pineal gland. And notice tryptophan is converted to serotonin in the gland, and this reaction, once again, is light dependent through the eyes. And we have found out that once we make serotonin in abundance, we can then make melatonin at night. And melatonin is extremely important for us to live a healthy and rejuvenating life. It actually is a potent antioxidant. The most potent antioxidant vitamin that we eat is vitamin E, but melatonin is 30 times more potent than vitamin E. And it also can be helpful in improving depression because so many people have sleep issues when they have depression or anxiety. This was an interesting study of 89 men and women randomly assigned to two groups. In one, participants were given a light therapy box donated by Philips Lighting that emitted pale blue light. They were told to use it every morning for 1 hour over 3 weeks. The rest were given boxes that emitted a dim red light, which has no known benefits or harms to the body. And 3 weeks after the therapy ended, more people in the light therapy group were considered treatment responders, meaning their depression scores had dropped by at least 50%. Now, there was no other therapies utilized here. And so it wasn't like they were doing a comprehensive program. It was just the light itself, what we call reductionist therapy. And of the light therapy participants, you can see a marked difference in comparison with the controls, 58 versus 34%. Patients who underwent light therapy began to show a steeper rise in the evening levels of the hormone melatonin, which promotes sleep. They also had a drop off in levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which at the start of the study had been elevated. When people come to our program, cortisol levels are invariably high. Depression and anxiety drives those cortisol levels up. Our adrenal glands are trying to handle the stresses of a brain that's not being able to cope with things very well. And so it really cranks that out. And we don't need to give adrenal hormones to help this situation. In fact, a lot of people mistakenly start to feed their body things so that they can produce more adrenal hormones. No, that's not the solution. The solution is to take care of the brain issues behind the coping issues that are causing this. And just light therapy itself lowered those cortisol levels because it was improving the depression and anxiety. I think bright light therapy definitely now deserves a place in the treatment of major depression, said the study's lead author, which was a psychiatrist. But yet we have so many people come to our program and they've been in psychiatric institutions. They've seen psychiatrists for years and they've never been told about light therapy. It's basic and it's so simple and it's something that anybody can do. We actually, of course, have those light boxes available, but now there's even an availability where you can actually wear glasses so you don't need to be in one spot or carry this box around with you. There's light glasses that emit the blue light from the same wavelength of blue light that comes from a sunny day in the sky. And they can walk around in the morning. They can do whatever they need to do. They could be eating or even exercising and getting the advantage of that blue light. And of course, we know from creation that it's not blue out there in the universe. It's black when you get away from the world, but It requires actually what happened on day number 2. Light was the first thing, but on day number 2 is when white light actually was able to turn into blue light. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. And we now know, although the original studies were done on white light, and white light, it requires a lot more brightness to produce its benefit, but it's still very effective. Blue light, we don't need near the brightness, and we can get a more powerful effect. So it's actually easier on the eyes. It doesn't have as high a risk, for instance, of causing cataracts or damage, light damage to the eyes itself. And so it's a really extremely safe in comparison to white light. White light is very safe as well, but blue light really doesn't have any side effects in the lux that we use. Interestingly, light goes beyond just the making of serotonin and tryptophan. Researchers found that men who were exposed to an hour of bright light first in the morning experienced an increase in luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is also a brain hormone. It's produced by the pituitary gland, and it influences reproductive hormones in both men and women. Increases in LH in men drive up testosterone levels, while the hormone triggers ovulation in women. Studies have shown it does help with depression, and it also improves libido. Now, the world has a way of taking care of problems that have to do with maybe reproductive hormones. And around the world, drugs like Viagra have sold in the billions of dollars. But interestingly, Viagra does not improve libido. It does not improve actually depression either. In fact, there are studies showing that it can increase the risk of depression, particularly when it's utilized frequently. Increases in LH are going to improve testosterone levels. Viagra does not improve testosterone levels. And so light therapy can actually improve a major problem that we're seeing in the Western world, and that is low testosterone. Low testosterone is often caused, there's multiple causes for it, but the most common causes are not enough bright light in the morning or blue light to be able to produce the luteinizing hormone that can improve the testosterone levels. And another major problem is too much sex, or what we would call super stimulatory sex. And that means not sex by design. Sex by design, obviously, is penile vaginal sex. But when we go in climaxing in ways that are not by design, it actually lowers testosterone levels, and it does a lot of other adverse effects on the human brain itself. And so these men are not told this, however, by medical practitioners. In fact, a lot of the medical practitioners don't even know this themselves. They're just making money trying to shoot these men up with testosterone because their testosterone level is low, not telling them you won't need these expensive drugs and the side effects of testosterone shots, because there are many side effects of them. All you would need to do is get light therapy in the morning and then back off on what you're doing sexually, and do it not over frequent, and do it God's way if you have a lifetime marital partner. And what a difference it makes in regards to those testosterone levels. Interestingly, when women with long and irregular menstrual cycles are exposed to bright light, the cycles regularize. And so we see a lot of women with depression and anxiety having all sorts of menstrual problems. They could have amenorrhea. They could have very long cycles. Polycystic ovary disease, you also tend to have long cycles. And one of the treatments for these conditions is back to light therapy. In fact, it's also been shown to even help diseases like inflammatory bowel disease and irritable bowel disease. Irritable bowel disease is a circadian rhythm disorder of the gut. And so light therapy, and by the way, irritable bowel syndrome is very prevalent in those with depression and anxiety. About 40% of individuals will also have IBS. And this light therapy can significantly help them as well. I had an engineer come to our program, and he had issues with testosterone. He had low testosterone. He had low libido. His wife wasn't too happy with him, and he was seeing all these testosterone doctors. And I looked at his testosterone; it was low, and I said, "Let's try this." I told him these two methods, and amazingly, in 10 days, his testosterone came up to a normal limit. I should say in the normal range. And sometimes it'll take longer than that. His responded very quickly because of the things he was doing to actually keep it down there. But he was amazed what happened. And he said at first, when I heard from you, Dr. Nedley, that this was going to be the treatment for my low testosterone, I thought you were a quack. Because I've been to all these testosterone doctors. Nobody told me anything about this. And I thought, this can't happen. And, but yet without testosterone shots, he saw the evidence, and he announced Dr. Nedley is not a quack. He's actually who we should have seen to begin with. And why don't the other doctors know about these lifestyle measures that can improve even hormonal issues that can have some adverse mental health effects? So day number 2, let's see how we're doing in regards to time. According to my watch, we have about 30 minutes left, and I want to give some time for questions and answers as well. So I know this has been more introductory at this point, but is that correct? Can I have the program modulator? Do we have about 30 minutes left?
Yes, we for sure have for 30 minutes, but with the question and answers included.
Okay, with question and answers included. So we'll go through this a little more quickly. We're not going to go through all of the 7 days because there's two. Remember, there's two sessions, and so we're going to go through the other days of creation tomorrow, and then you'll have that quiz as well. But the second day, God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." So what was happening on this second day of creation? We see a word that's repeated many times in here, and that is the word waters. At first, light came to this amorphous globe, and of course that was needed for what needed to happen next, but water was really not part of the equation. And so now there was waters divided from the waters. So there was waters on this globe, but there was also waters divided up into the atmosphere. And the dividing of waters is something crucially important we have found for the rapid improvement in depression and anxiety that we see in our program. And I'll explain that here in a little bit. But this is, again, Nathan Green's painting showing the waters being divided from the waters on this second day of creation, with the light also there. And of course, many of the equations in science trying to demonstrate these amazing things that are happening, including the energy aspect as well, with E still equaling mc squared. Prior to Einstein, we thought mass always had to come from mass. And we now know that's not true. Energy can be translated into mass. And the energy of God's creative power is what produced the masses of the waters being divided from the waters, and this wonderful atmosphere that we don't see in any of the other planets surrounding our sun. It's only this planet that has the beauty of the waters and being divided from the waters. And of course, part of the water that's necessary is, in order for our brain to change, it needs to be hydrated. Inadequate water intake leads to difficulty in staying focused, impaired short-term memory function, impaired recall of long-term memory, diminished ability to perform mental arithmetic, mental fatigue, headache, and even depressed mood. And this can occur in young people as well as older people. For instance, in teenagers, moderate dehydration in teens, given the limited availability of brain metabolic resources. These findings suggest that prolonged states of reduced water intake adversely impact Notice what type of functions? Executive functions, such as planning and visual spatial processing. What portion of the brain here is being referred to? Yes, it would be the frontal lobe of the brain. This is where the executive functions are at. And teens have issues with their frontal lobe. It's not fully developed yet. And they also often have habits that suppress it even further. But one of the simple factors of helping teens with their executive function as well as adults is keeping the brain well hydrated. And of course, with the atmosphere that's there, it's not just waters divided from the waters, but now we have oxygen, we have nitrogen, and of course, water in the air itself. Even in desert locations, there's still some water in the air. It's not 0% humidity, but it's very low humidity. But the water is still there, an important ingredient. And in the atmosphere, as we breathe in particularly fresh air, we can see some very positive brain changes. If you go down, it takes some instruction, a breathing instructor, to be able to breathe 4 to 6 times a minute without getting short of breath. But if you're doing that, you're actually exchanging air far better. This is one of the reasons why even if you plug in the term deep breathing into Ellen White's CD-ROM, you will see how she talks about executive functions actually improving, how it's important for students to have the proper posture where they're able to get this nice exchange of air and they're able to breathe deeply. And she says it will actually improve learning. And studies have actually demonstrated this now. Increased oxygen levels during exercise occur, but also throughout the day when we do the slow, deep breathing. Mood has been shown to improve. Digestion improves as well. And there's additional benefits of fresh air, air that is exposed to light, air where there is moving water by the ocean surf or by waterfalls. These are called negative ions. Or following a thunderstorm. After a thunderstorm, it's good to get out and breathe that fresh air. Evergreen trees also produce these negative ions. One of the advantages of Weimar Institute with all of our evergreen trees and that just nice smell of taking deep breaths here at Weimar. It improves learning and concentration. It reduces anxiety. It improves mood significantly. And one of the aspects of dividing waters from the waters that we utilize in our program is having actually 2 sets of water tanks. And this is called contrast baths. We have hot water, and then we have cold water. And of course, we can have hot water pools that are amazing, that are part of God's creation, where the water comes from very heated areas in the earth. And we can have cold water pools, and sometimes these are even next to each other. And this is why people travel to these spa locations all over the world, because of the therapeutic benefits of this. But we can get this, and we do have this at Weimar Institute. And just to explain a little bit, in our first program, we mentioned how it was 19 days. There was one woman, and I mentioned how most were getting better at 10 days. There was one woman who was not getting better at day 12. And she was from Alaska, and we were utilizing the light and those things. But even then, she was not getting better, but she saw virtually everybody else in the program getting better. And we realized, it'd be nice for her to have a response too. Let's try some contrast hydrotherapy. I had known about this before. In my residency, I was allowed to take an elective at Wildwood Institute and was trained by Bernell Baldwin about the physiological effects of contrast hydrotherapy, even in regards to the brain. He was a neuroscientist. And so I thought, let's utilize this. And so what happened after we did these contrast hydrotherapy treatments, 3 cycles each in the hot and cold, and then did it again in the afternoon, within 2 days, she started actually not only improving, but by day 3, this was now day 15, she was actually better than the patients who had improved significantly by day 10. And so all of the other participants wanted to know what we were doing with this girl. And we told them about contrast hydrotherapy, and they said, please, we have just a couple of days left. Can we all go through this? And of course, we allowed them. We had to rearrange our schedule, but this is one of the reasons why contrast hydrotherapy is now part of the standard program that we utilize, and why we've been able to shorten it to a 10-day program, because we get better a lot quicker by dividing the waters from the waters and participating in the immersion of that. And so let's go to day 3. We're still on time, and this may be our last possible day. We'll see if we can get to day 4 or not for a few questions. But day 3, God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And when he spoke those words, it happened. And this is Nathan Green's painting of day 3. The dry land, the plants, and some of them shooting up, the young plants. As well, of course, we can see the effects of the atmosphere there in day 2. And you can see all of the designs that he was putting into the leaves and the seeds and all of these amazing things that he was, as the design engineer, putting forward in this painting. Interestingly, these plants and these seeds are crucially important for us to be able to make more tryptophan and to be able to get more tyrosine into the brain, where we can make more dopamine and more norepinephrine. There have been 21 diets in prospective randomized trials tried for depression and anxiety, and only one that showed the highest level of scientific evidence and also had a response, and that was a plant-based diet. Getting rid of the flesh foods and just centering in on plants produces a significant benefit in people with all forms of genetic backgrounds in just 2 weeks. There are some people thinking you have certain blood types, this isn't going to help you. If you're an undermethylator, it's not going to help you. Not true. The only diet that's been shown universally in depressed and anxious people to help in a randomized controlled fashion is a plant-based diet. And so we'll just, we will go to day 4. I'm just going to mention that there's so much more that we could say about diet. And we might be able to get into more of that tomorrow in regards to why that's the case. But let me just mention, arachidonic acid is present in flesh foods, and arachidonic acid also present in fish and in eggs. And this is a pro-inflammatory molecule. And depression and anxiety is often due to inflammation in the brain. That's why when everyone comes to our program, we're actually measuring these inflammatory markers. And as we go plant-based, there's no arachidonic acid there, so we're not pouring fuel on the fire of inflammation. And this is thought to be one of the reasons why they improve so quickly within just a 2-week period of time if we're just doing diet alone. Now remember, that's a reductionist study where everything else is the same, but we're just changing the diet. In our program, of course, we get better response because we're utilizing all of these things together. And I have no doubt the diet by day 10 is already producing benefit. Day 4, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And this is a crucial part. By the way, the text goes on, and God made 2 great lights. The greater light to rule the day, and of course, that's the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night. And of course, that is the moon. And this day was to divide the light from the darkness. Natural light in the daytime is best for melatonin production at night. We mentioned that. Notice the difference here. If you're exposed to outdoor light in the daytime and your melatonin level, the red is natural, the yellow, you're being exposed to light, but you're primarily indoors. One of the reasons, the internet is driving us even more indoors. There's less people outside than ever before in human history, especially because of COVID. People are not recognizing sunlight will actually help them in their immune system. Exercise will help them, but people are hunkering indoors. And I've heard of so many patients that are not exercising and they used to exercise. Big mistake. But they're indoors with artificial light, and notice what's happening to their melatonin level. It is not near as high as if they were outdoors. But also, if we're in light all the time, which a lot of people are because they are afraid of the dark, or they have their TV on in the room, they just turn the audio off, or they have lights on so that they can see to go to the bathroom, but they're not dim lights like the moonlight would be. But studies have shown no darkness is bad for your health. Research in mice found that 6 months of continuous lighting led to a loss of strength and bone mass and signs of increased inflammation. The findings are worrying for people who experience prolonged light exposure, such as shift workers and hospital patients. So if you're working at night, you're up with light. And even the artificial light is doing you damage. This is why even in hospital patients, we need to have them have their light and darkness. They get their days and nights mixed up, and they even go into what's called hospitalitis and get confused. Interestingly, some of the effects seem to be reversible in these people once darkness is reintroduced. Of course, this wasn't people, I'm sorry, this is mice. But notice that even after the mice, after 6 months, they lost muscle mass. They had more inflammation, that was able to be reversed once darkness was reintroduced. And this issue of biology shows an experiment in even more mice, 134 mice. They experienced no darkness for half a year. By the end, the mice had lost about half of their strength compared with controls, as measured by grip endurance tests and their ability to cling to bars, while the signals of their internal body clocks were weakened. So they didn't have the energy they needed in the daytime, and they weren't able to have the restorative sleep at night. This is why even in, unfortunately, this happens in prisons where they have the lights on all the time. And so these prisoners get weakened. And so I would encourage any prisoner to get a hold of these night shades, these Bose comfortable night shades, so they can, even in a light environment, try to make it as dark as possible over their eyes so that they can have far better health, even in prison itself. The bones were affected too. The bulbous spongy part of their bones that are responsible for bearing most weight lost a third of their volume. So osteoporosis is often induced by having too much light and not enough darkness. Became 10% thinner in just 6 months, and they began to suffer from the early stages of osteoporosis. Increased inflammation, such as a rise in number of neutrophil white blood cells, occurred, also usually associated with stress or infection. And Ellen White said years ago, invalids too often deprive themselves of sunlight. This is one of nature's most healing agents. It's very simple, therefore not a fashionable remedy to enjoy the rays of God's sunlight and beautify our homes with its presence. And so sunlight itself, this day 4 was not just about darkness, but also about sunlight and being able to get vitamin D as well. And once again, she calls it nature's wonderful healing agent. And we now know that the effects of the sunlight are far better if we get the vitamin D from the sun than taking it from supplements. Supplements can help us some, but not near as much as the sun itself. Then this statement from Ministry of Healing: vigor declines as years advance, leaving less vitality with which to resist unhealthful influences. Hence the greater necessity for the aged to have plenty of sunlight and fresh, pure air. And so the older we get, the more sunlight we need. But normally I see only young people out in the sun. And the old people tend not to be in the sun. And of course, in the old folks' home, they're virtually never out in the sun. And this would be something that would be very important if you're running an old folks' home. And that is to get them out in the sun every day. It will help them significantly. And so that leaves us now a total of 11 minutes for questions. And we will go through 5, 6, and 7. Very important information coming up on the final days of creation. And as we put these principles that God used in creating this world, amazingly, he can recreate this brain, even though it's having major trouble and we think that a person is beyond hope. I hope this has been helpful to you, and now I'll open it up for some questions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Maybe if you stop sharing the screen, then we can see who is speaking and asking questions. And I would ask to every attendee, if you have questions, do not hesitate, but don't forget to put on your microphone that we can hear the question.
I would have a bunch of questions. Maybe I start with one. So if I get you right, you'd say that you should never use SSRI, so the normal drugs for depression, or would you use them as side method to the natural remedies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as a physician, I do prescribe SSRIs. I'm very selective in my prescriptions of it for multiple reasons, some of which I've shared. But there are about, even in our program, there is, I should say 90% within 20 weeks will be depression-free, anxiety-free, and medication-free. But there are going to be about 10% that are going to, in order to be depression-free and anxiety-free, because of genetics as well as developmental adverse childhood experiences and some of the scars that have occurred on the brain, some of those might need some medical assistance. And so in our data, 10% will. If I am utilizing it in an outpatient setting, I'm utilizing it in a very careful way. First of all, when we utilize SSRIs, if someone's suicidal, they need to be seen rather quickly because we're trying to help their depression. But if we just have them on a month follow-up, those are the ones that are going to be ending their life because they're not being monitored very closely to see what's happening. So if someone has suicidal tendencies, you definitely want to be seeing them very frequently after putting one of these drugs on. And so often with the suicidal tendencies in the outpatient setting, I won't utilize those if I'm not able to see them quickly, and I will utilize these other therapies, which will actually have a more powerful effect in helping them. So I know I could go into a lot more data regarding the use of medications, but I never take an approach that they should never be utilized, nor do I take them off of them when they first come to the program. A lot of people think I'm going to have to stop my medicine if I go to Nedley's program. No, we actually get them better first, and then it's so much easier to get off the medicine. In fact, they'll feel better off the medicine than they ever did on it once we fix the underlying issues that brought their previous physician to feel a need for them to get on that drug to begin with.
Thanks.
Anybody else? I'm not hearing. You may have to unmute yourself.
Hello, I have a question. During your session, you described blue light as a beneficial. So what's the difference between the blue light you described and the blue light we have from our phones, from our smartphones? Thank you.
Yes, no, a very good question. And of course, there's a lot of problems with the blue light from our screens. And particularly when we're getting that blue light in the evening, that's the worst time. And a lot of people tend to be on their devices in the evening. And that's the very worst time. I did not show you the data that if you're getting blue light from screens in the evening, your melatonin level is going to go down. So, and even after you go to sleep, you don't get the nice peak in melatonin. You get a delayed circadian rhythm. So you're always wanting to go to bed later. This is why these screens and the use of them has dramatically been associated with the increased incidence of depression and anxiety and sleep disorders. So 3 hours before bed, I don't recommend any screens with the blue light. And in reality, part of this is due to the sleep the light darkness cycle that the Lord put in creation that he knew was best for us. And if we are reading, for instance, if we're reading books before going to bed, it doesn't have any adverse effects on us. Utilizing the white light or even artificial light. But the issue has to do with the blue light. Now, I think there's benefits. There actually have been shown to be benefits with the blue light with screens when we're utilizing it in the morning. But it would be far better to not get blue light from screens, but get it from the atmosphere, get it from the sun shining there, or get it from the simulated light boxes, which are going to be far better than screens because they're simulating that blue sky. So we don't have them use screens in the morning, although there could be some benefit. If there was no light therapy boxes, if there was no light therapy glasses, we would actually do something on screens to produce even more of that blueness in the morning to help set our body clock and help us to produce more serotonin. So it's not universally bad, it's just the timing of that blue light that can be universally bad, particularly when it's used in the evening.
So we also have some questions that went through the chat. I will try to take 2 questions at a time. So the question was, if a person who damaged his brain with drugs as cocaine and so on, and here the second question is, if the brain damage was regarding violent or pornographic movies, so if such a brain that has been damaged, can that brain be changed again as it has been so damaged, even to the point of having hallucinations?
The answer to that is yes, and we have treated many individuals in those conditions. In fact, one of the psychosis is dramatically on the rise throughout the world, and it is also tied in, you didn't mention marijuana, but marijuana-induced psychosis, just look that up. It is really dramatically increasing the incidence with the wide availability of marijuana. And hopefully Europe doesn't model the United States, but the United States and state after state is making this a legal drug that you can just purchase over the counter, and psychosis rates are going up. And we've had those individuals come to our program, and if it's marijuana-induced psychosis, they will actually be able to get better if we treat them early enough. So if you wait over the course of years, the brain can change permanently. And so if we can catch them, particularly within the first 3 months of that happening, or we've even had patients within the first 6 months, their psychosis can completely go away utilizing the same principles that we were talking about today. In regards to pornography and violent movies, yes, the brain can improve. And here's the underlying principle to know whether it can improve. Does the patient have any ability to have circulation and activity in their frontal lobe? And if the answer to that is yes, the brain can change positively for the better. Now, some individuals, if it's been head trauma where they've, had their entire frontal lobe just destroyed from a tremendous accident or explosion, those individuals are not going to be able to change their brain for the better. Maybe a little bit here and there, but not the dramatic transformation that we see in our program. But if the frontal lobe is capable, then we will see that being able to, we will see with the principles that we outlined, that brain to be able to change dramatically, even in regards to psychosis.
Okay, and another question that was sent online. What would you suggest for someone with early onset of cataracts and the use of light?
Well, if it's early onset, I would actually recommend some UV protective glasses, or you can even get ultraviolet protected cataracts. It's the ultraviolet light that's producing the issue. It's not actually the blue light that we're seeing. It's the light that we're not seeing that's producing the major trouble there. And also a diet high in omega-3. Diet high in omega-3 and lutein. Particularly the long chain omega-3s can actually prevent the development of cataracts. And so it's diet combined with UV blockage that can help preserve those lenses and prevent the more rapid progression to cataracts.
Okay, thank you that for the online question. I don't know whether someone still has another question.
I have another question. Is there any maximum on water you should take in? Because I had a lot of discussions on this with my parents regarding salts and micro, I don't know how it's called in English, in the blood if you drink too much.
Okay, drink too much of what? Water you're talking, or something else?
Can you drink, like, if you drink 10 liters a day, is it too much?
Oh, okay.
Drink too
Yes.
much water.
Yes, you can drink too much water. Absolutely you can. And it will actually wash out your electrolytes and cause a low sodium, and that can cause some mental health issues as well. So water needs to be utilized in moderation. And we've had some excessive water drinkers that had got into trouble over that. And so normally it's going to be, yes, 10 liters is normally going to be too much water unless you're outdoors in the heat, and those people need lots of water. If you're exercising outdoors and in heat, it's actually important to prevent heat stroke and those sorts of things. But if you're living a normal lifestyle and you're only exercising maybe an hour a day, then 10 liters over the course of many days is going to likely produce some problems and some hyponatremia.
So normally we say that's about 2 to 3 liters a day is optimum. Am I right with this?
Yes. So normally we're going to, we actually measure it over here in cups. And of course, a cup is as a quarter of a liter. And so normally you're going to need a minimum of 2 liters a day. And it can be up to 3 liters a day very safely. So once we start getting under 2, that's when we start getting into the problems that I mentioned earlier in regards to brain function.
Thank you.
Okay, I think there will be more questions if we would have more time, but unfortunately time is running up. So I would say thank you so much for this lecture, Dr. Nedley. And I think on behalf of all attendees, I can say that it was very strengthening and so good to see how well that science and biblical teaching, especially creation, go together, because nowadays we hear so often the opposite, but you've proven that both can go very well together. And also, especially in these days with lockdowns and insecurity, I think items like anxiety and depressions are very important to know more about. So once again, thank you very much. And we've started with 40 participants, and we went up to more than 50. And I would like to give a little reminder to all attendees that tomorrow, same time, so 4:15 p.m., we will have part 2 of this lecture. So I would invite everyone to participate to this part 2. And for now, I think time's up to think about food, but at the same time, we also have the possibility to take some time to visit the exhibitions. And at 7 p.m., we will have the evening devotion with John Bradshaw again. Plus also, we will have the opportunity to have a mini concert as well. So thank you once again for the lecture and attending this lecture. And I would say have a very blessed evening and convention. Thank you.
Thank you.